or not. Barbara goes on to say the amount you pay in there, which is actually your home, is very high, regardless of who pays for it. I reckon many unvaccinated people put a lot of garbage into their bodies without a thought, so I'm sceptical when I hear them refusing the jab. Apparently, the vaccine reduces the viral load in transmission. That's why most people in hospitals with COVID are unvaccinated. That's Barbara's view. What's yours? We'll come back to that very shortly. But it's time now for The Clash, in which we tackle a big story of the day from opposing views. And tonight, with upwards of 20,000 people expected to cross the English Channel illegally this year, how can we solve the migrant crisis? And what is ultimately going to be the way that we stop an evil industry in human trafficking? How draconian should the measures be? Should we even consider turning away migrant boats? Or is that an assault on the basic human rights of a vulnerable group? Joining me to debate this is Benjamin Loughnane, Research Fellow at the Bow Group, the world's oldest conservative think tank, Shoaib M. Khan, who is a human rights lawyer, and Steve Valdez-Simmons, who is Amnesty International's UK Refugee and Migrant Rights Director. Shoaib, let me start with you, if I may. What's your view on what to do with this illegal trafficking of human beings?
Yes, I mean, I think there is a great scope of conflating two completely separate, or let's say quite distinct issues. So one is obviously asylum seekers, people fleeing places where their life is in danger or persecution, like we've just seen in Afghanistan, previously Syria, many other countries around the world. And this one issue that really seems to have hit the highlight or the headlines ever since Priti Patel, a few others have started talking about, and that is human trafficking. So I think we do have to distinguish between the two. So if we are talking about how to stop human trafficking, then the main way of doing that is to have lawful, reasonable, easy, straightforward, understandable, navigable routes for asylum in the UK. The point is a family in Afghanistan, in Syria, around the world, who is in danger, fears persecution. How do they get to the UK to claim asylum here? It is just not possible to claim asylum in the UK from abroad. You can't go to a British High Commission. You can't go to any post. There is no other way of claiming asylum from abroad. So I think that is a huge misconception between the public, which is not helped by the right-wing media and politicians and this general right-wing rhetoric. So the point is, if someone wants to claim asylum in the UK, save their life potentially, they have to get to the UK somehow. How do they do that? They don't have passports, they don't have visas. They can't just turn up at Heathrow and expect to be allowed in. So the only way they will get in is to get to the UK somehow. And if we have no safe legal route for them to be able to apply for something and reach here, then of course they're going to go to human traffickers.
Mr. Khan, they're not in danger in France, which is the country from which they are fleeing.
I mean, well, firstly, many maybe. So that is a starting point. I think it's wrong for us to suggest that any country is completely safe for everyone. Secondly, in international law, international humanitarian law, refugee law, there is no requirement that one must claim asylum in the first safe country, even if we do consider it safe. So that's secondly a thing. Again, like I was talking about previously, a myth. A myth. So basically, you don't have to claim asylum. It's perfectly legal to travel on forwards, to go to where you speak the language, to go to where you might have family, to go to where you feel safe. And that is the point. If someone does not feel, there must be a reason. So having traveled how many ever hundreds, thousands of miles and reached France, there must be a reason they want to travel further and get here. They might have family, they might speak the language, whatever reason. And I think that is a reasonable thing for an asylum seeker. Secondly, if we don't allow that or expect that, then we're an island. Do we never take in any asylum seekers? How are asylum seekers ever supposed to arrive here? Obviously, they're going to be coming via Europe or via other what we consider to be safe countries. The point is we need to bear our share of the burden or play our role in this.
Loughnane, what's your view on this?
Well, I think it's absolutely ridiculous to suggest that the people coming from France are in any way asylum seekers. They've passed through a number of safe countries in order to reach France alone, much less to reach Britain. The UN Convention on Refugees actually states that they should settle and claim asylum in the first safe country they reach. That is never Britain. I don't buy into this idea that people are coming to Britain because their lives in France are so difficult and so awful that they have to cross the Channel. There's one reason why they're coming, and that's because we are a soft touch. We are the softest touch in the world. The amount of services we provide to asylum seekers while they're applying for asylum means that we're a very attractive prospect, and that's why they come.
Benjamin, just to interrupt you briefly, would they risk life and limb on the Channel for better treatment in the UK?
I'm not sure that the Channel is a place where they're risking life or limb, perhaps in the Mediterranean where things are a lot harder, much more difficult. But I think there's only been a couple of fatal accidents in the Channel over the past few years. Very few people have actually fallen into the water, drowned. And even if they were to capsize, our lifeboat service, our border force are right there to pick them up anyway. So I don't think there are many risks associated with crossing the Channel.
Amnesty International's UK Refugee and Migrants' Right Director is Steve Valdez-Simmons. Welcome to the show. Steve, what's your view?
Well, I think it would be helpful to get some basic things correct. The Refugee Convention does not say that someone must claim in any particular country. It's quite clear, and it's always been clear, that people may claim in the country that they choose. There are some caveats to that, about people who have settled in places, if they really have settled somewhere, not moving on to new places. But the people that we're mostly talking about fall into two categories. People who either have connections here, so they've chosen this is the place they want to claim, and they are perfectly entitled to do that. And we must point out, very few do. France receives very many more people than we do into its asylum system. We receive a very small amount of people into our asylum system comparatively. And secondly, there are people, and I don't know why Benjamin keeps saying this, there are people who are not safe in northern France. Anybody who wants to go and see the conditions of people living in squalor, receiving violence from the French authorities in northern France, desperate to escape from there to hopefully find safety here, can see it. We've documented it many times. Many other people have done so too. They are a small minority of the people who seek asylum, it's true, because, as I say, France receives very many more people into its asylum system, a good thing. It would help if we took some responsibility as well.
However, Steve, the bottom line is that there is a business model, isn't there, for these gangsters who are essentially making thousands out of human trafficking. And if you facilitate these illegal crossings any further, and if the numbers year on year increase, you're just playing into their actual hands.
Well, the first part of what you say, I completely agree with. It's completely true that people are making huge amounts of money by enormously exploiting, doing tremendous harm, sometimes inflicting grave violence on the people at the heart of all of this. And of course, we should all deplore that and want to stop it. But the question is, does making life even more miserable and dangerous for people who seek asylum, does that do anything about the business model? It doesn't. And in fact, Benjamin refers to Libya. You can see that in the Mediterranean. Exactly these arguments have played out over the last few years in relation to Mediterranean crossings. All that has happened is very large numbers of people have been trapped in cycles of extreme violence because Europe has suggested that somehow or other, turning the back of rich nations effectively on providing some degree of responsibility that they owe as much as poorer ones will somehow break business models. It doesn't. Smugglers go on to thrive just as much, if not more so. Indeed, the more people who are pushed back find themselves pushed back into exactly the same exploiters who exploited them the first time around. So we should all deplore that too.
Ultimately, what really matters, Shoaib, is British public opinion, and the British people and many millions of people watching this programme are not happy that there are people entering the country illegally and crossing the channel at great physical peril.
So firstly, I think that we do all, politicians, the public, organizations, media, need to put basic human rights, humanity, saving human lives above either public opinion or public votes. So that is the first thing. But secondly, even if we talk about public opinion, it is pushed by politicians. What they heard is Theresa May's speeches. What they've heard is seen are columns in the Daily Mail. What they've seen are columns calling these people cockroaches. what they've seen.
Shoaib, I agree with you, Shoaib. That language is Shoaib, that language is absolutely reprehensible. But the public do not want to see people entering the country illegally. I can't think of a country in the world whose citizens are happy to see people entering their territory illegally.
So two things. Firstly, Pakistani people might not be, Turkish people might not be. They take in millions, absolutely millions of asylum seekers. Now, when a human is in danger, we have to save their lives, whether our public likes it or not. But secondly, what you say about the language being represented, yes, it is. But the thing is, that is what the public is fed. How much of our public have actually gone to an asylum detention centre? How many of them know what actually happens? How many of them know about the conditions in northern France, like Steve just mentioned?
Well, Shoaib, that's something that should be raised with the French, clearly. But the public don't want to see people entering the country illegally. I mean, it's a big, big concern. And the numbers get higher and higher every year. And you could argue that it's a growing humanitarian crisis. And therefore, it's got to stop. And you've got to smash the business model of these gangsters.
Well, we need to stop invading countries so the people aren't displaced is the first thing. But secondly, the main thing is what we need to... these are people who have to be saved. Now, the point is, if we say, well, they've had another chance, they've been to another country, it's nothing to do with us. I think that's callous. I think that's inhumane. I think that's potentially unlawful. We have to play our role.
But what's a tolerable number of people to cross the channel illegally every year? It's anticipated to be 20,000 this year. How high does it go? 30, 40, 50,000? If these gangs can demonstrate to other potential victims that, you know, our services are very effective, will get you into the UK, the numbers will grow exponentially.
Well, what is firstly, you talk about numbers, but the numbers depends on how many countries are war-torn. So no one predicted Afghanistan would go this way within a few weeks, a few days. So obviously the numbers would rise. Any estimate is meaningless, firstly. But secondly then, what you say about... Sorry, can you repeat what was the second point?
Well, yes, it's just the idea that the numbers will grow exponentially.
Yes.
And a lot of these gangs that traffic people and prey on the vulnerable can actually do TikTok videos and Twitter videos saying, look, here's more evidence of people getting off boats and entering the UK illegally. So we'll get you into the UK as well. It's a sort of vicious cycle, don't you think, and a humanitarian crisis.
It is a vicious cycle, like Steve said. So even sending them back is not going to work. They're going to keep trying again. We actually deport people and they still come back. So that is the vicious cycle they're in. But the way of doing that is, like I said, having lawful, legal, humanitarian, humane routes that these people can get to the UK. I don't think anyone is doubting here that these are people who are not actually fearing for their lives. Everyone agrees that they are. But the point is, how do they get to the UK to claim asylum here? If basically what you're saying, you know, it's Fortress Britain, no one should ever claim asylum here. I don't think which anyone is suggesting. But otherwise, how do people get here to claim asylum?
Benjamin Loughnane?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to go back to a point that Steve made earlier where he said in cases where people have settled for some time in a country, then they shouldn't move on. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And when I was down in Dover and I was down in Folkestone, I went up to Napier Barracks and I spoke to the migrants. I went up to them and actually spoke to them in person. Most of them spoke German. They didn't speak any English. What are they doing here? They don't even speak English. There's no good reason for them to leave places like Germany, where they have settled for years, since 2015 when they first came over, for them to then move on. The reason they're moving on is primarily economic. It is not because they're in danger. It is not because northern France is really, really terrible and awful and they can't survive there. It's because they know economically, socially, in every sense, they will have a better life in Britain. And I fully understand that. I am personally of the opinion that Britain is the greatest country on earth, and if I hadn't been born here, I would be trying to come here myself. But at the end of the day, we're a small island nation. We can't take in everyone in the world. You know, we need to ensure that the countries that they're coming from improve and that they're better places to live, but we can't just take everyone in. It's ridiculous. There has to be a limit. There has to be a point where we say we can't take any more.
Although, Benjamin, we do take a lower number of migrants internationally than, for example, the French and the Germans. So should we sort of raise our quota?
We take in a lower number, but proportionally we take in more. We're a far smaller country. Those countries are far bigger. They've got lower population densities. They can handle more than we can. However, I don't really think this is the answer. I don't think asylum is the answer. A lot of this isn't, you know, people fleeing war, even at the start point. It is people fleeing countries where They can't get on economically, they can't get on socially, and they want to come to Britain or to Europe to have a better quality of life. That's all fine, that's all well and good, but they're not fleeing war. We need to dispel this myth. They are not refugees for the most part.
Let me briefly ask each of you for your solution to this issue. We can agree that it's suboptimal at watching people cross the channel, whatever your politics. So I'll start with you, Benjamin. What is the solution? How do we make this problem go away?
Well, firstly, we need to stop giving money to the French every time a load of migrants come over. The numbers continue to rise and we think, oh, we'll throw more money at it. It's like your children not doing their homework and you say, if you don't do your homework, I'm going to give you more pocket money. I'm going to let you go to bed later. That's not going to work.
Well, I wonder whether the French would appreciate a bit more resource so that the conditions at the camps in France are actually of a higher standard.
We've been giving them hundreds of millions for the past few years and the numbers have only increased. I don't think the French are acting in our interests, and nor should they really when you think about it. They've got this problem just as much as we do. If migrants want to leave their shores and come here and they turn a blind eye and say, fine, that's not our problem, you can't blame them, because at the end of the day, they don't want them there, we don't want them here, and they're going to let them cross the channel because it's then not their problem.
Steve Valdez-Simmons, what's your answer to this issue?
Well, we have to deal in facts. The starting point is that the majority of people who make these crossings, as all the data shows you, are refugees. When they're allowed into our asylum, it's no good shaking the head. You can look at the statistics. They're published every quarter. So you can see. Well, then read them again, because I look at them daily because it's part of my job. The majority of people.
Statistics are seeing different things.
Well, the statistics are plain. The Home Office even says it in black and white. The majority of people who make it through the system, who are entered in the system, are refugees. They are found to be refugees. And if we start from that, and if we do think our country is so great, then I just beggars belief that we're incapable of managing an asylum system, which is not seeing an increase. Yes, more people cross the channel by this route. More people are not entering our asylum system. Hasn't been the case for the last couple of years. Can't say that about France and Germany, who are receiving very many more people. So, of course, we could do more. The only answer, frankly, is either we take responsibility, remove some of this market from smugglers by enabling people to make journeys, to make their asylum claims here, rather than leaving this all to the control of very ruthless and dangerous people.
Final thoughts on this one, Shoaib M. Khan?
Yes, I mean, firstly, just to say really briefly, obviously the solutions aren't what the government and the media have suggested. It's not sending them off to a volcanic island. It's not jet skis trying to turn their boats around. It's not a lot of everything that they've been trying. So that's the first thing. It's a huge waste of public money. But secondly, what is, like I've said repeatedly, it's legal, safe, humanitarian, humane routes for asylum seekers to be able to apply for asylum, potentially from abroad, where they're in danger, so that they can be brought to the UK safe.
My sincere thanks to Benjamin Loughnane, Research Fellow at the Bow Group, Shoaib M. Khan, human rights lawyer, and Steve Valdez-Simmons, Amnesty International's UK Refugee and Migrant Rights Director.